To recognize that whenever you abandon yourself, your nervous system, when it asks the question, do we have our own back? And the answer is no. You're just opening your whole body up for inflammation. And so you start to see that, like, when your own nervous system doesn't trust you to have access to the word no or to leave circumstances that are unsafe, that means that essentially your safety is at the whim of other people. And so your nervous system is going to be in a dysregulated state. You're going to be hypervigilant. You're going to be, constantly in a sympathetic response.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Negotiate Your Best Life. I'm joined today by somebody who's super special. He is a human connection specialist. He's a speaker, a coach, founder of the platform Create the Love. And over the past decade, he has helped literally millions, you heard me right there, around the world discover how to show up authentically for themselves, not for others, ultimately for others, but for themselves, and build deeper relationships and connect using emotional intelligence, relational dynamics, and leadership skills. And so he's been featured everywhere: Forbes, Men's Health, GQ, and he has his own podcast as well. His name is Mark Groves, and I'm so excited to have you guys meet him. So welcome, Mark.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the raving introduction.
Yes, well, of course. And I think so many times people feel, we were talking a little bit before we got started here, feel disempowered because they think, I just am a magnet for people who are toxic, for narcissistic people, for people who don't have my best interests at heart. What can I do to stop being a magnet for these people?
Yeah, what's fascinating is that, or sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off
go
there.
ahead. No, I would just love for you to weigh in on that.
What's fascinating to me about that is what we're seeing as this incredible ability to attract people who are dysfunctional, unhealthy, etc., is that within that lives the very gift of being able to understand them. So, what I see as when someone, let's say, for example, is hyper vigilant, hyper attuned, always walking on eggshells, is more the people pleaser. A lot of their survival strategy was to really try to understand and predict other people's behavior, right? In order to try to create perceived safety. And so if you can go deeply into understanding someone's behavior in trying to fix them and trying to support them and trying to, make it so you matter, ultimately is what we're trying to unconsciously do, then you can also use that as a really beautiful ability to discover who they are and what. So instead of what you're coding as a green flag, you start to learn from your own self and be able to figure out who to avoid. And so when someone talks about having chemistry and they say, I can't help it, I'm drawn to these types of people, the first thing I would say to them is, well, that's not chemistry then. Like, that's an invitation to heal something. So you're unconsciously drawing them into your experience so you can change your behavior. But that's actually just wounding masquerading as chemistry. And we're treating the pain of that connection with arousal.
Mm.
And I
I
don't think we
call
think of
it,
that a lot.
yeah, yeah. I call it letting trauma do the picking, trauma
Yeah,
do
that's
the
good.
choosing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and isn't that the key is to, because where we can get caught in the story of being the victim, which I don't want to negate people's experience of being victims. It's just that when we can get caught in the story, we don't also create the other story, which is to be empowered through what we've been through. Because in the information that we're ashamed of is actually the wisdom to be able to choose differently. And so you can't learn from something that you exile. You can't learn from a part of yourself that you're ashamed of. And what we really need to be doing is sitting down with those parts of ourselves and saying, teach me. Like, how do we know? What are we drawn to in them? Because those parts, they're like detectives. They know what's up.
Yeah, so I think it's what you're saying, and if I can just sort of maybe unpack this a little bit, and I think this is a really important distinction. So there's a distinction here between I have a bullseye on my back. What's wrong? Why do I have a bullseye on my back? And going, wait a minute, I can have a discerning eye instead, and then say, that person, I'm going to send them light, but over there. They don't get to be in my space. They don't get to be in my energy because energy is expensive and not everybody can afford to have some of mine.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, you raise your value when you create those types of boundaries around your well-being, your mental health. And instead of that, as you were saying, I have this bullseye on my back, I start to look at it instead of why are narcissists, for example, attracted to me? It's really starting to flip the script and say, why am I a match? Like, what is going on within my own experience
Hmm.
that what someone else calls a red flag, I've been ignoring and even calling it a green flag. And so that's what I mean. If we can compassionately explore why we do what we do without blame, without any of that, because ultimately the behaviors that get you to where you are serve you, like the developmental survival strategies that you create, like people pleasing, if you have a overtly easily angered mother, it makes a lot of sense. So, the wanting to change the story or resolve the story that you grew up in, gosh, that makes so much sense. But yet, at some point, an adult needs to be present, and there needs to be choice between who is in your life and who you're drawn towards and who you actually allow. And I think about that as, like, I call it taking charge of your charge. Like, you're really starting to take charge and creating discernment about who gets to be in your life. Like, a common pattern in people in that pattern, in that circumstance, is to just label someone the one right away, or like a twin flame. That's a favorite, you
Yeah,
know?
soulmates or
Yeah.
whatever it is. I mean, but even I've seen it happen in professional situations
Hmm.
too. I mean, I can say for myself, I had a very successful law practice. And then when I first was wading into this field of doing other things a few years ago, I ended up doing some different business opportunities and getting involved. And one of them happened to be with this woman who turned out to be a covert narcissist. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, how did I end up here? How did this happen? And uh, I just remember that my business coach, who's also a very dear friend and been friends with, for years, and she knows me really well. And she said to me, Rebecca, you think when you start something new that you need somebody else and you don't.
Hmm.
And she's like, you're a badass, go do your thing. But, here I was sort of like attaching myself to somebody else that I knew was not good from the beginning. Like I did see red flags, but I thought, well, but the good is going to outweigh the bad, and she has all these connections and contacts, and in me, she saw, well, here's this person who's going to do all the work, and I get to take all the credit, and and because a lot of times what these people will do is they get somebody who's going to serve them, right? And so I remember when that kind of was falling apart, my business coach said to me, it's not what other people are doing, it's how it lands for you.
Hmm. And
It's
how did that land?
what's that unhealed thing within you, you
Yeah,
know?
that is the doorway for them to enter.
Correct. Correct. Why are those exits not sealed off or entrances,
Yeah. Well, and a
right?
lot of time we'll get really upset with ourselves because we consider it on some level like a relapse. Like recently I was working with a client who has a very narcissistic ex, was, married while he started dating her. She didn't know about the marriage.
Mm.
All of it came out later. I'm sure lots of listeners can relate to
Yeah.
stories like that.
The overlapping marriages is always,
Yeah, like this ability to create a completely different deceptive life, and to a regular empathic regular human, you can't even understand it because it's not even conceptually understandable from your kind heart. And so we as humans are so naive unless we've really come to terms with being in relationships with people like this, that people are capable of evil. There are people who have no
yes,
access to their hearts because their capacity for shame is so low. And
correct.
what was interesting is, she had a little too much to drink, and then she contacted him, her ex, after
Oh,
they broke
never,
up.
never drink and dial.
Yeah, well, so, she kind of came to this session with shame. And I said, look, this is such beautiful information. First, we know drinking is a doorway. You can't drink. You can't drink now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
until you resolve this, that's a doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And what a beautiful thing that you reached back out. You also got reminded of who he was by the way you responded. And, I think about it like, not to justify anyone's reaching back out, don't do it. But if you happen to, the shame will just keep you trapped. And I have a different perspective on shame too, because like Brene Brown talks about how, like, guilt is I did something wrong and shame is I am something wrong. But shame as an evolutionary behavior is actually healthy if you're violating your own morality.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you feel crappy because you contacted someone who treated you unfairly or unkindly, it makes sense that you're going to have a somatic response to that.
Mm-hmm.
But what we don't want to do is tuck it in a box and put it in a corner. We want to open the box and say, what was the reason? What's the doorway that walked you back towards this, so that we can understand it, so we can seal it off, as you said.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
changes everything moving forward.
Yeah, and as you say, narcissists or highly toxic individuals they carry the most pain and the most shame, even though you can't tell because it's so buried underneath this behavior of that looks like confidence that might show up as entitlement or things like that, but it really is that their ego is so fragile that they can't admit any kind of wrong or do anything. And so they find people who are going to serve that shame wound in them by allowing them control or allowing or giving them services or whatever it is. And but more importantly for the other person, starting to recognize, how did this happen for me? Why did this happen for me? I mean, my husband and I have done a lot of personal development work and a lot of therapy and everything there is. And I realized through that whole process that when I was 6 years old, I started at a new school. I was in second grade. I had skipped a grade, so I was a year younger than everybody. We moved houses that same year, like all the things. And I carried for years into my adulthood this feeling of I don't belong. I, I'm not good with groups. I don't do well with new people. And I never realized that it all stemmed back to starting at this school and feeling like the outsider and not even thinking about the fact that, hey, these were 7-year-old kids. They just didn't know the new girl and they had been together since kindergarten, whatever. They weren't like excluding me so much as they just didn't know. But I carried that for years. And I think that that's the kind of thing that we do is we carry these things into adulthood. They're not healed, and then we continue to show up as that person in situations, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because now you're constantly using confirmation bias to, well, see, I'm not good in groups. See, I'm the outsider. Well, there I am again. It happened again in my 20s or in my 30s or whatever. And we all do that. So, how does one start to become aware that this is what they're doing?
I mean, well, the first part you said of just being willing to ask those questions. Why do I do what I do? Why am I in these relationships? What shaped me? What makes these types of things familiar or okay? I mean, I remember going through, because I've done, the plethora of personal growth things too, alongside my wife as well. And I remember when we were early in our relationship and I was pursuing her, we were about a year and 2.5 years in, and it felt like I was just chasing her. And in the psychotherapy we were doing, there was this realization of why she was distant or withdrawing, based on her patterns and why I was over pursuing. And I remember in the session, I just had this really profound awareness of like, wow, at some point I normalized to pursue someone who's not fully choosing me.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. And I started to see that her hesitancy, instead of being pathologized and trying to fix it, which that gave me value. I mean, it was at the core of my work, you know,
Hmm.
uh, which of course we often go into work to resolve ourselves. And so I started to see like, oh, wow, maybe she's actually the canary in the coal mine. Like maybe her hesitancy is healthy and my lack of hesitancy is not healthy. Like, why am I not hesitant with someone who's hesitant? That doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you label anyone the one who's not sure about you? It can't be the one. It just, but mathematically, it wouldn't even work. But they could be the one who woke you up. They could be the soulmate who, I always think of soulmates as being people who at least invite you to reclaim a part of your soul, like to actually heal and to become integrated. And the word integration really about being whole. And so, how do we restore wholeness? And if we think of experiences like you had at school, I had experiences at school that were really painful. And if we don't make them mean empowering things, they will disempower us,
Hmm.
because ultimately humans are meaning making machines, and
Yes.
our unconscious mind will almost always choose a protective, which means negative perspective.
Hmm.
And I think it's Gabor Mate who talks about how all humans have two needs. We have the need to belong and we have the need to be authentic. But when authenticity threatens belonging, belonging wins, which means if you being you threatens a relationship, you won't be you to keep the relationship. And that's true of interpersonal, family, romantic, communities, cultures. And so it's really starting to see, how do I hold on to who I am, honor my values, and be in relationship, where the question that I encourage people to also always ask themselves about any choice is choosing them, choosing me. And if ever choosing someone else is not mutual with the choice of yourself, then it's not worth it. It's self-abandonment, dressed up as, I think, often in these patterns, conscientiousness.
In some ways, here's what hit home for me recently is that, and I'm going to butcher this, but somebody said, you get upset with this difficult, toxic person who's lying, and it's very easy to see if somebody's a liar or a gaslighter or whatever, but we don't turn the mirror onto ourselves and say that we're actually lying to ourselves
Mm,
when we say this is okay, when we don't speak up, when we know that we should, when we tell our kids that, it's going to be okay or whatever it is, but you're not being truthful and honest with yourself, that this is not a situation or a relationship that works for me, that I feel empowered by, that I can grow inside of, that I feel supported in, that I can be authentic in, right? Because they feel like somewhere along the road that they didn't matter enough
Hmm.
to take care of. And so what I see with a lot of people like this, by the way, is they end up going, well, I don't need much. I'd rather take care of everybody else. I'm okay. I'm taking care of my kids, or I'm taking care of my family, or I'm taking care of everybody at work, or I'm supporting all these people in my life. And I'm okay. I don't need much. Um, so I can be there for everybody else.
Yeah, it's such a, I always think of it as it's a big red pill. It's eating a humility sandwich, and it doesn't taste very good when you recognize that you are actively participating in every relationship that you are in. You're choosing to be in it. It's just recognizing this choice, even if it's, feeling like there's a lot of unconscious reasons, there's psychological manipulation. We're not negating any of that. And I think we live in this world that's really trying to enforce that world. The world is very binary, so you're either a victim or a perpetrator. But even in this space of being able to recognize the complexity that I could be the victim of an experience, and yet the only way I'm going to exit it is to recognize that I have choice in the experience. Now, of
Yes.
course, we want to get into the understanding. Well, why would I tolerate abusive behavior? Great. What a really important question. And I guarantee there will be some very validating pathology to that. And
Hmm.
yet, you're the one who has to decide through resourcing, through friends, through community, through understanding your nervous system, how to choose differently, how to do something very courageous. And I think that willingness that you're talking about to say, I am a participant in this dynamic. Well, now I can choose my way out of the dynamic because I recognize the responsibility of my own choices. I also think it's interesting that we often garner a lot of power from our victimization. And so I think it's really recognizing that we often learn, usually through parents, uh, we learn how to be powerful through the leading of our wounds. And Carolyn Mays calls it woundology, that we'll end up in a conversation with someone, and within the first 10 minutes, we're telling them about our childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And so we're using this experience that we've been through as a way of controlling dynamics and enforcing empathy from someone. And that's a really fascinating when you could start to see, as you said, which I think was so beautifully said, there's a dishonesty to wearing masks. There's a dishonesty to people pleasing. And Robert Glover, in his book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, he says, nice guys are actually anything but nice because it's contrived. And so
Oh,
people
yeah.
pleasers are it's manipulative kindness. And when we can just have compassion for the fact that we had to learn how to avoid conflict to be safe, we can also see how we use the avoidance of conflict to control. And that is the shadow side of that adaptive strategy. And it's beautiful, but it's not productive as an adult if you want to have a mutually beneficial relationship and you want to exit toxic relationship dynamics. And if you're in toxic relationships, that means you are toxic too. And that's a hard truth to hold.
Totally. I mean, I think there is a payoff to being a victim. I mean, and what people have to do is be honest with themselves about what's the payoff I'm getting here for being a victim. Is it security? Is it that I don't have to be alone? Is it that I get to feel like I'm needed? Or, there's got to be something. Everybody feels sorry for me, whatever it is. And then you have to start realizing, okay, what's the price now that I'm paying for this?
Big
What's the
price.
price? And and then go, okay, well, what is it that I really want from my life? Um, and and being honest about that too. I mean, some people just are so used to. The thing is, I think that we all want love and connection. That's part of the human experience. And I tell people all the time, we all want to know that we matter. We all want to be seen. We all want love and connection. That's us by nature as humans. I mean, you can go to the jungles of Africa or, the top of Wall Street or whatever it is, and every single human is the same in that sense. But we don't necessarily go about it I would say the right way, but the most optimal way, because I think a lot of times we're attracted to what's familiar,
Yeah.
not what we want.
Yeah. And
Um,
to the nervous system, different is dangerous, even if different's healthy. And that's tough, to recognize like, wow, I have to increase my capacity to make a different choice and get a different outcome. And really being compassionate for that, even if toxicity is the familiar, we'd rather stay in a familiar hell, than an unpredictable heaven.
well, I think that we feel in a subconscious way that, or an unconscious way, that if we can get the other person to love me, if we can get the other person to see me, then I'll be healed. Then that will heal me from the fact that he didn't get enough love as a child or whatever it was. And and so they keep you alive on hope. They keep
Hmm.
you going on hope. And you're never going to get there. I always say if you chase, you never catch. If you're chasing, you're never catching. If you stand still and you're authentic, then it comes. And it's sort of paradoxical in a way. But
Yeah, it is.
um, but if you think of um Glinda the Good Witch in Wizard of Oz, where she like shoos away the Wicked Witch and she's like, "Go away, you have no power here." Everybody else is cowering in the corner. And she's like, "Please, I know who I am." Whatever. Like you're a gnat flying around. And, she wasn't worrying about pleasing the Wicked Witch. You know, that was the last thing on her brain because she knew who she was.
Yeah, I think when we recognize that, as you're saying, falling in love with hope, when you fall in love with someone's potential, you forego your own. That's what you're trading. And
Hmm.
so, like you said, if I think that you choosing me, you doing this will finally resolve my wound, but in the chasing of them to get that thing, we are doing it to ourselves. I think that's always the craziest irony is like, I want you to choose me, so I'm going to lose myself and not choose myself to get you to choose me. It's a very young energy. And that's why, as the adult, you said it so well, you just stand still. And then, I love the idea that what is meant for you can never miss you, and what misses you was never meant for you. There's a trust in that,
Hmm.
you know.
So true. So I want to go back to what you were talking about with the nice and that there is no such thing as nice. I think what happens, especially with people pleasers, is, they think they're going to fix people or they think they're going to help people. And so they go over and above. And so they end up with these leaky boundaries. I mean, I even had it a few years ago. I had somebody working for me who was having a lot of issues with their teenage daughter. And I mean, she really was having some serious issues. But what was causing issue for me was the fact that this person was not showing up fully for work
Hmm.
and doing the things that they were supposed to be doing. And so I was sort of being made to feel guilty, like if you if you care about me and you care about my friendship and you care about my daughter, that you won't hold me accountable. for work. And I think that's what happens a lot of times is that people start to feel, um, oh, I don't want to look like I'm not a good person. I'm not a kind person. I'm not uh, a, a caring, kind, good, nice person. So they just let things go that they shouldn't let go. But then what happens on the flip side of that is resentment. Resentment starts to build. So that nice guy, that good person, whatever, the person who's qualifying themselves as nice, ends up feeling very deeply resentful because they feel like they're being taken advantage of. They feel like um, it's not fair. And so I had to learn I am a good person. I am a kind person. I'm a caring, compassionate person. And I can also enforce boundaries and hold this person accountable at work and say, if you can't do your job now, let's talk about what we need to do. And that's a hard thing for some people.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the core of most workplace dysfunction is codependency, because ultimately what we're doing there is we're prioritizing someone or something over ourselves, which will always create resentment. It doesn't mean that compromise can't be present, right? Like when someone's going through a hard thing in their life. But there is a line between compromise and self-abandonment. And so there has to be a conversation about when that's starting to come up. Because usually the way that we know that we're self-abandoning is resentment. And it's 100% of the time. Resentment, if it's present, it means that you're prioritizing something or someone over you.
Mm,
And codependency is really about outsourcing safety and security to something or someone because it could be a choice, right?
mm,
It could be that I'm sticking with a job that makes me feel a certain way so that I don't have to feel uncertain on it, but it's
mhm,
self-abandoning to be in that job. Just
mhm,
like being in a relationship with someone where you don't have access to your voice because you don't have access to resources, but you're
mhm,
depending on them for that. Again, these are relational dynamics. So it's not about removing power dynamics, although that can be helpful. It's about making the implicit explicit. So naturally in a workplace, if you're paying someone's salary, there's going to be a power dynamic. And so it's about actually having a conversation about what someone's going through and how do you honor the exchange of what you're asking for in terms of work and their capacity for what's going on in their life. And if that means reducing their salary, then it means that, right? Like these are the conversations that we have to be having. The thing about niceness is nice and kind, I think, are different things because, of course,
I agree.
yeah, like kindness and generosity are imperative to successful relationships.
Agree.
And when we are operating from the place of, I'm going to be kind to you because I'm trying to get something, we're creating covert contracts. And this
Hmm.
is at the core of people pleasing, is it's deception, it's dishonesty. And that's why that line from Robert Glover is so good because he's essentially saying like, you're trying to get something. And because you're trying to get something, it's not real, it's not authentic.
Hmm.
And we really crave, like, to love someone is to tell them the truth.
Yeah, so we're coming to an integrity conversation,
Yeah.
right? And so integrity is being able to do the right thing, even when no one's looking and even doing the right thing for yourself. And so again, are you being honest with yourself and and having integrity in the relationship? I want to go back to something that you said though about um have like what it actually means because I think that it's not just that people are kind to do things for the other person. I'm trying to remember exactly how did you put that? Um, there was a distinction that I wanted to make about that when you're trying to create these contracts for with people, I think, what's the alternative with that? Is it that you just love unconditionally? I mean, how do you know that you're in that,
Well,
right?
loving unconditionally is really bullshit, you know,
Yeah.
because there's no such thing. And
Yeah.
so, it's being able to honor that there are conditions. Conditions are important, they're boundaries, and a lot of the time self-abandonment is justified with this I just love all out. That's such a classic red flag line to me. It's like,
Yeah.
but I just love everybody. I love everyone so much. And it's like, no, you don't. You're
Right.
conflict avoidant and you call
Right.
conflict avoidance love.
Ooh,
But
that's
love is the truth. Love is telling people the truth. I'm hurt. I feel taken for granted. By the way, I set you up for that. Like taking ownership of the ways in which we set people up so we can hold it over them.
there's something else though with this, and that is, I think the resentments also come from expectations.
Hmm.
So we have expectations that people will behave the way we think they should behave, or that we would, or whether either that we would or that we think they should. And then when they don't meet those expectations, then they that's when resentment starts to build also.
Yeah, I think when we recognize that unconditional love is not unconditional tolerance, so we like confuse having compassion with someone with tolerating whatever they do. And
Hmm.
so if we want to really move out of the space of expectations, at least communicate your expectations because those are standards, those are boundaries, those are values, right? Like your expectations or your needs, I think is probably a better way to express it, is like the needs that you have in a relationship about how to communicate, what does it mean to be in partnership together? How do we handle conflict? These are all agreements that we need to have up front. Now,
Hmm.
look, a lot of us aren't taught any of this. So we end up in totally dysfunctional relationships because we're like just trusting the universe to guide us through, even though our wounds are the things driving the car. And so we have to learn through relational outcomes and challenges that we have that we have things to heal. And if we really want to be in healthy relationships, we have to take responsibility for our behavior, and our partner has to take responsibility for theirs. Like there has to be a mutual desire to grow together, to use the friction from the relationship to, become more powerful, but not in a way like where people think of power like games, like that person, oh, if I text them back, I'll lose the power. As soon as you're starting to think about power in that context, you've already lost,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, because
yeah.
like if my wife has more access to her voice, becomes more powerful, I become more powerful. Like it's not finite,
Oh,
it's
of course.
mutual.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think of that in terms of leverage. So I'm writing a book, my fourth book right now on leverage, and I'm referencing back to power versus force, what
Oh,
David
so
Hawkins,
good.
right? Because true power is having the leverage. I mean, that independence leverage to be the Glinda the Good Witch. That's true
Hmm.
leverage and true power. And that means that you're kind and generous and all compassionate, all of the high level emotions, the high vibrational emotions, and you also honor yourself and have integrity about honoring yourself. So I have a question for you. I'm thinking about this as we're having this conversation. What do you still struggle with the most, and how do you stay aligned and showing up for yourself?
A lot of the more recent process that I've been walking through, I always kind of like consider the work that I'm drawn towards. It just tends to be like I'm feeling it before I'm labeling it before, not before everybody, but I just mean like I feel a bit like the canary in the coal mine about some things. And for me, that's technology. And how I relate to social media, my smartphone, etc. A year and a half ago, I would have said that the most frequent place to figure out where you need to grow is your intimate relationships. I still think that's true, like your relationship with your mom, your dad, your kids, your romantic partner, your dating patterns, going through a breakup. Those all offer so much material to figure out what patterns you're stuck in. But I could take someone in relationship to anything and figure that out, food, exercise, etc. But what I've now discovered is I think that the most frequent place to find material to work on is your relationship to technology, because phones are now the most important relationship in our life, and they're heavily impacting the actual most important relationships in our life. And so for me, there's been a big journey of understanding the nervous system, how it relates to technology, dopamine, blue light's impact on the brain, AI's impact on cognitive function, which is actually pretty big too. And I started to realize, like, wow, okay, your nervous system is always really asking the question, am I safe? Right? And when you have a social media profile, your nervous system is designed to assess your immediate life, right? You never had a version of you available 24 hours a day to social risk. But
Right.
now you have a version of you who's always available, always saying stuff like I do, at least. And if people even have private Instagram accounts, they're being evaluated by people they know.
Hmm.
If your profile, your YouTube, your all those things, you're being evaluated by people you don't know. But add to that, all of us are actually being evaluated by a non-human entity, an algorithm. And that
Hmm.
algorithm is assessing the quote unquote value of what we're saying. And so we have to recognize that the nervous system is going, am I okay? Like, while you and I are having this conversation, there will be things that have happened on our social media accounts. And if we're not mindful of how we relate to those things and we don't have boundaries around our relationship to technology and social media, it will cause a lot of anxiety. And it's because we don't have boundaries. We don't have like the relationship that all of us generally have with technology is determined by the technology, not by us. And so anytime you're in a relationship with anything and there's not choice, so if you're addicted to anything, and I would argue that everyone's addicted to their phone till they're not, that means that there's no choice. And, we talked before we hit record about there's this saying that the opposite of trauma is choice. So wherever you're not in choice, and Harriet Lerner has this great line where she says that unless you can leave something, you can't be honest in relationship. If you can't leave a relationship, you can't be honest in the relationship. Because if you were honest, you could threaten paying bills, getting food. And so you have to create autonomy within a relationship. You have to explicitly point out the power dynamics. You have to have resources to be able to have access to your voice. We have to just point out all these very human things. And so for me, there's been a really beautiful exploration of like putting all these pieces together for like, why do I have so much anxiety? I haven't been an anxious person. I'm fairly self-expressed, but I have definitely noticed that my relationship to technology needed a complete recalibration. And now that's where I'm doing a lot of teaching because I just think it's the most frequent place for self-abandonment, for, yeah, I mean, if you can't speak your voice truly in relationship, you definitely won't do it online, you know,
Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of cyberbullying going on nowadays. I mean, I just
cancel
heard,
culture, there's all of it.
yeah, all of that. I mean, which none of that existed when I was growing up in the 80s. I mean,
You didn't have to think about 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, a video going viral. And then you have the thing that's really interesting in terms of both the people you don't know and the algorithm is in all relationships. Like if you and I have a conflict, we can get on the phone and we can have a conversation. We're two adults. I could hear how I hurt you. I could hear how my behavior impacts you. I could then change my behavior. If I don't, you could end our connection. But with people you don't know and with an algorithm, There's no customer service at these companies. You can't say, oh, your algorithm is unfairly assessing my content and it's not getting any reach. There's no one to even listen to you. So it's not relational, it's one way. And so we
Hmm.
just have to honor that if you're prone to self-abandonment, if you're prone to feeling unheard, all of that will just be amplified by social media.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so much worse now, like for teenagers and that. I mean, I was just hearing about a 14-year-old that committed suicide because she was being cyberbullied. I mean, this happens every day. Uh,
Yeah, social media for kids, smartphones for kids. I would argue that looking back, we'll see, well, one, social media is essentially the smoking of today. And social media for young people is just, if you've not read for anyone listening, hasn't read the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, it's
mm,
incredible because he makes the case that social media is essentially the perfect weapon for young girls. And that's why
it is
you see girls, especially
oh,
boys too, but especially girls
so bad.
getting really their mental health is going down the tubes. And the way that girls handle conflict is relational. So bullying, gossiping, things like that. Social
They're
media is the
brutal.
perfect
I
weapon.
mean,
Yeah,
brutal.
it's perfect.
It's
It's
awful.
sad. And so you see this massive movement to the analog now. You see groups, schools saying no smartphones in schools. I heard something recently that really made me stop in my tracks, that the new class differentiator will be a sunlight-based childhood versus a screen light-based childhood.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Um, so h- going back to how do you realign? How do you realign? How do you get yourself cleansed? You know, I always, when I do meditations, and when I lead my groups in meditations, I'm always like, um, inhale high vibrational energy, exhale anything that's not serving you, let it go. You don't need to carry it anymore, but how do you realign?
So now with my understanding of technology and rewiring, creating different neural pathways, so the first 30 minutes of the day, I don't use technology. So that's dedicated to exercise, movement. I prepare my mind before I turn on my phone off of airplane mode.
Mm,
And the last 30 minutes of the day, actually, that's the one because I just started implementing this about 3 weeks ago and notice a huge shift because right away your first 30 minutes have a different association. And so
mm,
you're delaying the dopamine. And so you're actually creating more capacity for discipline throughout the day, which is really interesting.
mm.
And what you'll start to notice when you resensitize yourself to social media and how your phone impacts you is you'll start to experience disgust in relationship to your phone. And that's actually a healthy response to anything that's exploiting you,
It's sort of like when you go on a diet or whatever. I mean, like I don't diet anymore, but back in the days when I was like, I would go, oh, actually, I don't even like sugar anymore. I don't even want
right?
that white flour anymore, you know?
Yeah, you become sensitized to processed food and processed light.
Yeah.
And so that's why I always look for where in my life am I out of integrity with my core values? And if I'm going to go teach how to use a phone differently, access creativity differently, rewire, for me, the onus is on me to live it. I can't
Mm-hmm.
go tell you to do something I don't do. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, that holds me to a bar of integrity because it's my work. So for me, how I align is yes, that first 30 minutes exercise 4 to 5 times a week. Starting to read books again, like sitting down reading books. I used to listen to audiobooks a lot, but now that I just know all the data of how that's like going to the gym for your brain. So
It's
that
so funny that you say that because I have been always listening to audiobooks lately. I've been saying I'm too busy to actually sit and read a page. And so right now I'm rereading the actual physical book of Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
one of my favorite
And
books.
oh my gosh. And I'm realizing like every single word is like, I'm seeing it and I'm experiencing it and I'm grasping the meaning of these things, just revisiting this. I don't think I've read it for years, and so really understanding what he was saying and the power of it so much more than if I were trying to be walking the dog or doing the dishes and I miss half a sentence and like that sort of thing. You're in traffic and oh my God, what did I do? Oh, back to the words. I probably just
Totally.
missed a paragraph over here, so but it's okay. You actually grasp it more. It's so powerful. And I'm like underlining certain sentences and um to me it's been so much better. So what is one invitation if you just or at a cocktail or you just met somebody and they said, "Well, give me one thing. What's one invitation you would have for them to not be playing small or not be living from fear in relationships or not tolerating relationship chaos?" What would you say?
Well, I'd say that the ultimate cause of all of that, like the cost to your body is massive. The cost to recognize that whenever you abandon yourself, your nervous system, when it asks the question, do we have our own back? And the answer is no. You're just opening your whole body up for inflammation.
Mm.
And so you start to see that, like, when your own nervous system doesn't trust you to have access to the word no or to leave circumstances that are unsafe, that means that essentially your safety is at the whim of other people. And so your nervous system is going to be in a dysregulated state. You're going to be hypervigilant. You're going to be, constantly in a sympathetic response. And so if there's one thing I would say to someone is write out your top 3 to 5 values. Look at every choice you make in your life, every person and every choice that's significant, and assess, is it in alignment with the values or is it not? And is it possible to actually change the relationship so that it can, or is it not? What would need to change about that relationship to that thing or that person? And is it possible to change it? And if you just do that, if you literally just live that list, you go through each thing that needs to shift and you do it, your whole life will be better,
So
without a doubt.
have that inform all of your choices, all of the way you live, like have that be your North Star.
Yeah, because that will give you a thriving life. If everything in your life is built upon your values,
Hmm.
and you can trust yourself to say no to what isn't. I mean, we have to see that essentially everything that is exploits our attention, like our phones and social media and algorithms, they're all the doorway to those things is self-betrayal. When you're not living your fullest potential, you know that and you create suffering. When you say you're going to go for a walk and you don't do it, you're like, well, no one knows. You know, that's actually the issue.
That's it. That's it, right? If you're out of alignment and integrity to yourself, that's why I say make small promises to yourself,
Amen.
like even if it's, I'm gonna walk 1,000 steps today, like make it super small, easy. Okay, you don't go to bed without walking 1,000 steps. I mean, this one thing, I have a list that I make every single day of things that I'm going to do. And that is the one thing that first of all, you get the dopamine hit for checking off a list, but I do not put it on that list unless I plan to do it. And then by the end of the day, every single thing is checked off, period, unless something happened or there was some emergency or I make a promise with myself, okay, um I'm doing this one tomorrow because of this, or you can redefine your promises to yourself, but you don't just get to the end of the day and go, well, I didn't do half the things over here, because you're just telling yourself that you're not worth keeping promises to.
Yeah, and that is the greatest pain. You know, when we talk about that the opposite of trauma is choice, it's because trauma usually occurs where choice is taken away. And it's those small promises that you keep to yourself that we think that saying you're going to make your bed and making it isn't that big of a deal. But actually, what it does is builds the evidence that you are who you say you are. And
Yeah.
so when someone tries to get you to deviate from your center, you already have the evidence that you don't deviate. You don't break promises to yourself or other people's feelings. And when you stop, like there's a great book called The Book of Mastery, and the first principle is
I read
stop
that.
being, yeah,
Yeah.
so good. Michael
Yeah.
Gervais. And
Yeah.
it's like the first principle is stop caring what other people think. And that is one of the hardest things to do in the world, but
Oh, yeah.
start caring what you think about yourself.
Yeah. So good. So, where can people find out more about you? I know you have fantastic YouTube, Instagram, everything. So tell everybody where they can find you.
You can find me at markgroves.com, my podcast, Mark Groves Podcast, and on Instagram at Create the Love. And I mean, if you Google me, I'm kind of everywhere. So, yeah, wherever people, I also have a Substack that's called Humaning. And the whole idea
Oh,
of that is
definitely
like
check
longer
that out.
form. Yeah, it's all that's where I now create most of my content because I'm really interested in long form content. I think long form content is what could save humanity since short form content has done a number on us.
Oh, I mean, I just recently read that for reels that you're supposed to be switching angles or something every 2 seconds. And I'm like, okay, how do you do that every 2 seconds?
I
Um,
just get exhausted with all the rules so that I can siphon more attention from people. It's like we have to keep creating more evolutionary tricks to alert the primal part of the brain to stay focused because focus is becoming a real rarity. And I have a whole argument that if you can't be bored, you can't be in love.
mm,
So you have to, I think the greatest act of revolution of the future is deciding where your attention goes now.
yeah, I mean, and the fact that people have to have something every 2 seconds, I mean, that's like really shows you where we are now.
It's crazy.
So go and check out his Substack, his podcast, his Instagram. Obviously, such a good conversation. I'm so glad we had it. So
Me
important, so
too.
impactful. So thank you, Mark, for being here. And um, you guys go check him out and see what more he has to offer because as you can see, you'll learn a lot. So
Thanks so
thank
much. I appreciate everyone listening.
thank you.